It's November 17th, 1996, and you're sitting inside Madison Square Garden for the WWE's Survivor Series. The whole building is buzzing, the lights are up, and down the entrance ramp walks this enormous, clean-cut, smiling young wrestler, third generation, hand-picked by Vince McMahon himself. Weeks of televised vignettes building him up as the next great thing. His name is Rocky Maivia. WWE wanted you to love him. They practically begged you to love him. 20,000 people started chanting, "Rocky sucks, die Rocky die." Not playful boos, not the kind of heel heat that wrestlers actually enjoy. Genuine collective rejection from an arena full of people who looked at this carefully packaged product and wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. And as Johnson himself later told Oprah Winfrey on her Masterclass series, "That was a sobering moment. That was the beginning of the end of my initial run in the WWE." For most people, a moment like that would end everything, especially when the crowd turns on you during what was supposed to be your breakthrough night. But what this man did with that rejection is exactly why we're sitting here today, talking about a journey that went from $7 in a wallet to an $800 million empire, from that MSG chant to becoming the highest paid actor on the entire planet. And then, more recently, to a Disney wig that broke the internet and a box office collapse that nobody in Hollywood wanted to say out loud. This is the full story of Dwayne Johnson, how he built his success, how he reinvented himself, and why that image is now being questioned. This is Era Review, where fame meets truth. To understand who Dwayne Johnson became, you need to understand where he came from, and not just the headline version of the story. He was born on May 2nd, 1972, in Hayward, California. And yes, the wrestling bloodline was real and established before he could walk. His father, Rocky Johnson, was one of WWE's first black tag team champions, winning the titles alongside Tony Atlas in 1983. His grandfather, Peter Maivia, was a Samoan wrestling legend who competed across the NWA, AWA, and WWF for over 2 decades. The lineage wasn't just a marketing angle. It was his actual family history, passed down through generations. What often gets overlooked is how unstable that childhood really was. Dwayne Johnson has spoken in multiple interviews about constantly moving as a kid, with his family struggling to stay financially secure. By the time he was 14, that instability reached a breaking point. They were evicted from their home in Hawaii, and he later recalled watching his mother cry, unable to do anything to help. "When I was 14, we got evicted from Hawaii. I'll never forget my mom crying.
We were struggling to put food on the table like a lot of families back then, like a lot of families today."
He channeled everything he had into football, earned a full athletic scholarship to the University of Miami, became part of the 1991 National Championship team, and for a stretch of time the trajectory looked exactly like the story you tell yourself about how hard work pays off. But as any athlete will tell you, the gap between college success and professional selection is enormous, and in 1995, Dwayne Johnson was not selected in the NFL draft. He signed with the Calgary Stampeders of the Canadian Football League and was cut within 2 months. He came home to his parents' apartment in Tampa, Florida, with $7 in his pocket and a dead dream behind him. He's told that story so often it almost feels like a legend. But for him, it marks the lowest point of his life and the moment he decided to change everything. He began training for professional wrestling in 1996, wrestling under the name Flex Cavana in Jerry Lawler's United States Wrestling Association, even winning the USWA Tag Team Championship with partner Bart Sawyer. Vince pulled him aside before Survivor Series and said, "You're gonna win the whole thing tonight. I'm gonna throw you right into the fire. I'll never forget this." What happened after that night is where the real story starts. The crowd gave Rocky Maivia a rousing ovation after he won that Survivor Series match, eliminating both Crush and Goldust to become the sole survivor. On the surface, the debut worked. WWE fast-tracked his push, and by February 13, 1997, he had won the Intercontinental Championship, one of the fastest title reigns ever awarded to a newcomer. It seemed like everything was going according to plan, but wrestling fans in 1996 were changing, and they were changing fast. WCW's Monday Nitro was pulling viewers away from WWE's Monday Night Raw every week. He smiled too much. His character did and said almost nothing of interest. The harder WWE pushed him, the more the crowd resisted, and the chants of Rocky sucks and Die Rocky Die became a regular feature of his matches throughout early 1997, even as he held the Intercontinental title. As Britannica noted in their profile of Johnson, the aggressive push triggered a backlash from fans. Then something happened that, in retrospect, changed everything. In June 1997, Johnson suffered a legitimate knee injury in a match against Mankind and was taken off television for several months. During that time away, as he later described on Oprah's Masterclass, he had a realization that completely shifted his perspective. It wasn't me personally that they didn't like. It was the character. It was the performance of someone else's idea of who he should be. As he told Oprah, "In that moment, The Rock was born. A month later, I was the hottest heel in the company." The character that emerged was everything the previous one wasn't. Arrogant, confrontational, speaking exclusively in third person. He didn't ask for the crowd's approval anymore. He demanded their attention and then dared them to look away. The Rock says, "If you smell what The Rock is cooking and know your role and shut your mouth," weren't just catchphrases. They were cultural artifacts. The same 20,000 people who had chanted him out of arenas were now hanging on every single word. By 1998, he had won his first WWE Championship. His first real foothold was 2001's The Mummy Returns, where he played the Scorpion King in what was essentially a glorified cameo, though a cameo that earned him $10 million and enough studio interest to lead to his own spin-off, The Scorpion King, in 2002. Critics dismissed it. Audiences showed up anyway. Those early films weren't art, and nobody was pretending they were. They were proof of concept, evidence that people would buy a ticket because his name was on the poster, and that was the foundation everything else was built on. The real watershed came in 2011 when he joined the Fast and Furious franchise as DSS agent Luke Hobbs in Fast 5. He didn't just add a new character to an existing series, he injected something the franchise had been desperately missing, and the $626 million worldwide gross reflected it. A fading street racing movie series became a global action empire largely on the strength of what he brought to it. Then came Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle in 2017, which pulled $962 million worldwide in one of the decade's genuine surprise hits, and then Moana in 2016, and this one mattered differently. For the first time in a major visible way, audiences didn't just see muscles and charisma. For over a decade, Dwayne Johnson had been pushing to bring one specific character to life, Black Adam, the DC anti-hero. The role had been in development since 2007, and by the time it actually moved toward production, Johnson wasn't just excited about it. He had built an entire vision around it. According to reporting from Variety, Johnson had directly pitched Warner Bros. Discovery CEO David Zaslav on a multi-year plan that would weave Black Adam into the existing DC universe alongside Henry Cavill's Superman, ultimately building toward a major showdown that Johnson himself positioned as the future of the entire franchise. Before the film opened, he told audiences with complete confidence, "The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change." This wasn't just a hype line, it was a declaration of intent about his position in Hollywood. Black Adam opened on October 21st, 2022 to $67 million domestic in its first weekend. The biggest solo opening of Johnson's career as a leading man. But as anyone who follows the industry knows, movies aren't judged by opening weekends. The film finished with $393.5 million worldwide, against a production budget reported between $195 and $260 million. When marketing costs were factored in, Variety reported that Warner Brothers lost somewhere between $50 and $100 million on the project. Critics gave it 39% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audiences were more forgiving at 88%, but not enough to sustain what Johnson had promised. On April 30th, 2024, The Wrap published an extensive investigative report sourced from over a dozen production insiders who worked directly on Red One, the $250 million Christmas action comedy he made for Amazon MGM alongside Chris Evans. What those insiders described was a portrait of on-set behavior that looked nothing like the carefully constructed public image of the relentless, disciplined 4 a.m. grinder. According to multiple sources on the production, Johnson was consistently arriving 7 to 8 hours late to set, and on some days didn't show up at all, forcing entire crews to restructure their shooting days around his absence. The report estimated this pattern added approximately $50 million to the film's budget. The quotes from insiders were direct and unambiguous. The only thing Dwayne was consistent at was being chronically late, one source told The Wrap, while another described the production as a disaster, and a third said simply that Dwayne truly doesn't give a f. The report also pointed to a pattern extending well beyond this single film. The now legendary 2016 Instagram post in which Johnson called his Fast and Furious co-stars candy asses, which went viral and sparked one of Hollywood's most public feuds, reportedly had roots in the same underlying behavior. Similar complaints were cited from the sets of Rampage, Ballers, and Red Notice, where Johnson was alleged to have arrived 5 hours late, triggering a confrontation with Ryan Reynolds that left the two allegedly not speaking for years, and then the detail that took on a life entirely its own. The Wrap reported that Johnson had developed a practice of urinating into Voss water bottles on set rather than walking to a bathroom, and leaving those bottles for crew members or personal assistants to dispose of. When Johnson responded to all of this in a GQ cover interview in November 2024, he confirmed both the lateness and the water bottles, but pushed back hard on the specific numbers, calling the 8-hour figure bananas and ridiculous, and labeling the overall story bullshit. Director Jake Kasdan defended him, explaining that Johnson's morning workouts were built into the schedule and that his call times reflected that. Chris Evans offered a different kind of character reference in the same piece, describing how Johnson had spontaneously increased a crew raffle prize from $4,000 to $50,000 mid-conversation, ending up giving away nearly $100,000 to crew members in a single day. Amazon Studio released a statement calling the reporting ridiculous and false. In August 2023, the Maui wildfires swept through Lahaina and Kula, killing over 100 people in what the National Fire Protection Association confirmed was the deadliest wildfire in the United States in more than a century. Dwayne Johnson, who has deep Polynesian heritage and a well-documented personal connection to Hawaii, joined Oprah Winfrey to launch the People's Fund of Maui, each of them contributing $5 million to seed a fund that provided $1,200 per month directly to displaced adults in the affected areas. The intention was real. The fund eventually disbursed over $19 million to thousands of residents. The impact was tangible. The problem was the ask that came alongside it. In their announcement video, Johnson and Winfrey, one worth $800 million, the other a confirmed billionaire, asked their millions of followers to also donate to the fund. The video drew 60,000 comments almost immediately, and the reaction was not supportive. One commenter wrote, "Girl, you got some nerve asking us working-class people who can barely afford to put food on the table for our families to donate." Johnson addressed it directly in a video on Instagram, speaking to camera without a PR filter. "I get it and I completely understand, and I could have been better. And next time, I will be better."
I get it and I completely understand, and I could have been better. And next time I will be better.
He also said, The last thing you want to hear when you are living from paycheck to paycheck is someone asking you for money, especially when the person asking you for money already has a lot of money.
And the last thing you want to hear when you are living paycheck to paycheck is someone asking you for money, especially when the person asking you for money already has a lot of money. So I get it. I understand. I've never launched a fund before, but I'm a quick study and lesson learned.
The kid from the eviction, the man who remembers the $7, and the $800 million empire sitting beneath that persona. The gap had always been there. For the first time, a lot of people were staring directly at it. Red One opened on November 15th, 2024. The film cost $250 million to produce, with total spend estimated above $350 million once marketing was included. Its opening weekend pulled $32 million domestic. The worldwide total finished around $185 million. Not a catastrophic failure in the traditional sense. Nobody was writing headlines about a disaster, but quietly, persistently, not what it needed to be. From a man whose name had once been treated as a financial guarantee by studio accountants. Then came something worse than a box office disappointment. The Smashing Machine, the A24 sports drama directed by Benny Safdie, released on October 2025. It was based on the real life of MMA fighter Mark Kerr, directed by one of the most respected filmmakers working today, and critics called it Johnson's most committed and vulnerable performance. The kind of artistic risk that's supposed to reframe public perception and open new doors. It opened to $6 million domestic against a $50 million budget, the worst theatrical debut of his entire career. For context, Dwayne Johnson has not had a live-action theatrical hit since 2019's Jumanji: The Next Level. 6 years. Multiple expensive, high-profile projects. Consistent underperformance. On March 23, 2026, Disney dropped the first full trailer for the live-action Moana remake, with Johnson reprising his role as the demigod Maui, the same character whose animated version in 2016 had become one of the warmest and most beloved things he had ever done. The trailer accumulated 132 million views across platforms in its first 24 hours, outperforming first-look numbers for Moana 2, Barbie, Wonka, and Johnson's own Red One. By pure view count, it was one of the most watched Disney trailers in recent memory. But views and sentiment are entirely different measurements, and the sentiment was devastating. On YouTube, dislikes outpaced likes 85,000 to 37,000. The reactions across Reddit, X, and TikTok ranged from confused to openly mocking. Fast Company called it Disney hitting a new low for its live-action remake era. The specific focus of the ridicule was Johnson's appearance as Maui, a voluminous curly wig, a 40-pound prosthetic bodysuit designed to replicate the animated character's proportions, a transformation that required 2.5 hours in the makeup chair every single morning. Reddit users described the wig as looking like a Spirit Halloween 3 Musketeers wig. Weird Al Yankovic posted a side-by-side comparison and joked that casting agents needed to stop sending him headshots for the Weird Al biopic sequel. Johnson defended the production publicly, telling Entertainment Weekly that the suit was physically grueling. It was grueling because of the suit and how hot it was. In between takes, there's literally 5-6 people, all with fans, opening me up, pulling my hair back. Director Thomas Kail explained the creative reasoning behind the wig, saying that questions like, "What does it look like wet?" were genuine practical concerns when filming on the ocean. Some of the more measured criticism focused less on the wig itself and more on the broader disconnect. Johnson is 53 years old, and while Maui is a mythological demigod who theoretically exists outside of time, the live-action version reads with a different weight and energy than the animated character that audiences fell in love with a decade ago. Critics also noted that the remake was landing less than 2 years after Moana 2's release, which made the entire enterprise feel less like a creative revisitation and more like a franchise being strip-mined. The 2016 animated Moana was supposed to be the Dwayne Johnson project that outlasted the box office cycle, the one that showed genuine range, that connected with families and children on a level that no amount of action sequels could replicate. It was his legacy moment. And now, the live-action version of that same character. When your greatest creative triumph becomes the measuring stick for your newest controversy, that isn't a rough news cycle. That is a narrative shift, and narrative shifts are the hardest things in Hollywood to reverse. So, what actually broke? The gap between image and reality also became visible in a way it hadn't been before. And then there was the mythology problem. Black Adam wasn't just a movie, it was a statement about who Dwayne Johnson was in Hollywood, about his power and position and influence within the studio system. When that statement failed commercially and the political play behind it backfired, it raised questions that no amount of Instagram content could answer about the gap between the scale of the persona and the reality of what the persona could actually deliver. As of right now, in 2026, Dwayne Johnson remains one of the most famous human beings on Earth. Terramana Tequila is a genuine business success. Projects are still in development. He addressed the Smashing Machines box office numbers with his characteristic directness, expressing real pride in the performance, while acknowledging the result plainly. You can't control box office results. That's true. What you can control is the choices that lead to those results, which projects you say yes to, how the people building those films alongside you experience the process, who you actually are when the cameras stop rolling. The audience is noticing that gap, not with hatred. The MSG days of Die Rocky Die belong to a very different era, but with something that might actually be harder to recover from, a kind of mild, knowing skepticism toward a brand they once believed in completely and without question. Dwayne Johnson's entire life has been a story about reinvention. $7 to $800 million is not a metaphor. That actually happened to an actual person. This was Era Review, where we don't just look at the rise, we look at what the rise actually costs. If this hit different, smash that like and subscribe. We drop these every week. Drop a comment below. Can Dwayne Johnson reinvent himself one more time? Or has the audience moved on for good? Next week, we're pulling apart another Hollywood story that nobody's fully told yet. Until then, remember that the brand you build can absolutely save you, but it can trap you just as easily.